So I just thought I'd do a quick intro to tell you who you are listening to this afternoon. So apart from being called Gillian Arnold, I spent most of my life working for IBM, uh, about 20 odd years. And I did all sorts of roles, technical roles, sales roles, strategy, marketing. But in amongst all of that, I was working alongside a team to produce the process and procedures for what we do for women in the organization. And in around about 2002, that group spawned the ethnicity group. And we understood about the processes for creating an inclusive workplace. And that's the knowledge that I bring to what I do today. So what I do today is I run my own company. It's called Tectra. We do recruitment and training for diversity. So we recruit for diversity, and we certainly train around diversity, things like unconscious bias and micro inequities and interviewing for bias, and anything we're passionate about that fits into that inclusivity sphere, really. And I also sit on the board at the British Computer Society, and I sit on the board at the Council of European Professional Informatics Societies. So I kind of retain my links to STEM and technology, but I certainly see the diversity as my big passion. So I'm going to share my screen with you just so that you can see. I'm going to try and share my screen with you. It is going to work. It is going to work. There we go. So that you can see what I am going to be talking about. So I said that I would talk about creating an inclusive workforce and how to bring diversity into your technical teams. And if you read the flyer for the session, then the things that I was saying on that flyer was that if you do these things, I select and develop talent regardless of their race or their gender or their age. And if you create the right climate, and if you understand how to support people and manage your culture and manage your processes, all of that can help you to win and outrun the competition. And so I'm going to cover a bit of that, but I'm certainly going to run through the things that might get in your way, and I will talk through how to get there, what to do. So I've got some questions for you, and I've been desperately trying to get the chat box back up because as soon as you do a screen share, it disappears. We will have to have a word with Zoom about that. So the chat box is back up for me. And if you'd get your own chat boxes up, because I've got some questions for you. So into the chat, can you put an answer to this question? Now, Becky, can everybody chat? Because it's very silent. Oh, thank you, Joe. Made me feel a lot better. Ah, Nicola, yes, that does count as 100%. Anyone else? What's everybody got? Roughly, you don't have to be absolutely precise. Okay, yeah, Kath, that works as well. And Tom, you're doing well. So the next thing Good, good, good. Tom and Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. You're not the Sarah I know, are you? And then the next thing we're going to do is another question here now. So the next question is, what percentage of your IT department is over 50? Thank you, Henry. Wow, nice one, Nicola. Nice one. Okay, so quite low numbers there, and IT is a very young career. And the last one of this section, what percentage of your IT department is Black? So again, quite low numbers. Great, thank you everybody. So let's see how you all match up to the UK norms or the UK kind of statistics. So in the UK, and indeed across most of Europe, the working age population consists of about 50% women, but pretty much consistently across Europe, it's about 17% of the IT workforce. So we don't attract or we don't retain very many women. And when you look at some of the specific careers, there are very few IT engineers who are women. And yet there are loads of people in IT ops, loads of project managers and lots of web designers who are women by comparison with the rest, and a smaller number of very senior individuals are women. And women have different needs in the workforce, not just in IT, so they're more likely to be working flexibly because of their caring commitments, but not exclusively. Don't forget that not every woman decides to have children or is able to. And yet we don't treat them terribly well. So you do wonder whether the 14% lower salaries are one of the reasons why we don't retain women in the technical workforce. Look at disability stats. 19% of the working age population would say that they live with some kind of disability, and yet they only make up 11% of the IT population. So we could have another 37,000 people in tech in the UK if we only got up to 19% on people with disability. Just think how many more if we got all of the women. And we don't treat them very well either. So we don't ensure that they have equal pay, and they don't make it to the higher ranks, just like the women don't make it to the higher ranks. And with regard to age, as we saw, you didn't have very many older people. In fact, older people are quite a large percentage of the working age population. And as many of us start to work towards our 70s, then we could have access to 100,000 more staff if we only took those people who are over 50. And when you think about the over 50s in tech, they were perhaps coding or working in ops or working with things that could be really useful for RPA now, but they may be seen as ready for the scrap heap because they're over 50, which is very sad. So we could do more to attract the over 50s. Interesting fact about the over 50s, they make up lots of our IT directors. And ethnicity. Now, I asked the question about what percentage of your IT workforce is Black, because whilst 14% of the working age population is considered to be Black, Asian, or minority ethnic, 18% of the IT population are. So we're higher in that respect. But then if you break down the figures, what you notice is that most of that is coming from India. And actually, in a population which is hugely underemployed, like the Black population in the UK, we in IT don't utilize everybody we could utilize. So we're missing a trick here, and it's important that we get it right, because there is a skills shortage in tech. We know that. We know that as tech grows exponentially and fills every part of our lives, we need people to run it, to build it, to design it. And so the skills gap is widening, and we need to find ways to fill it. So going back to what I said we would do at the beginning then, if we have a look at the processes to get us to a more inclusive workspace and the things that might stop us, then we can see that you could outrun the competition. But I'm just going to spend a little moment mentioning why I think you could outrun the competition. And this comes from the business case for diversity. So a little plug here. At the British Computer Society, we're just finishing a book on women in tech, and the first chapter is about this. It's about the business case for diversity. There is so much data out there. When we first started talking about this in IBM in the late 1990s and early 2000s, there was no data. There was nothing. And the first thing that we came across was the McKinsey Diversity Matters paper, and that was in 2007. So it might seem like a long time ago to some of you, but actually it seemed like an enormous long wait from the late 90s to 2007, when we finally had evidence that inclusive and diverse teams would help you to win. And so McKinsey are really, really prolific now. They do quarterly reports, they do diversity, not just about gender, but anything that matters, really. Forbes are really interesting. Harvard Business Review have got lots of data, and there's masses of university research on the business case for diversity. So if you need to build the business case to ensure that you can put the right processes in place, then this is where you can go for all your data. But I thought I'd show you two of them. This is a McKinsey quarterly, and in it, the study they did, they looked at around about 200 companies across the US and Europe, and they looked at the companies with the most diversity at the high levels in the company and the best processes for diversity. And then they looked in that list of 200 at those who were the worst at diversity with the worst processes. And so what they're showing, or what we're showing in this, is they depicted the top quartile and the bottom quartile of those companies in terms of the diversity, and they showed that there was a significant benefit, around about 50% better return on equity for those companies that were more diverse, and more earnings before interest and tax for those companies which were more diverse. Now, when you think about that, it's probably made up of all sorts of different things. So it could be made up of the fact that they beat the competition. It could be made up of better customer satisfaction. It could be made up of the fact that they've got happier workforces because they've got a different culture or a different management style taking place. All of these things could be what's driving it. So I've got another slide here that talks about innovation. So if you think that we're all looking at our jobs with a different life experience, we've all lived in different ways and our understanding of the world is massively different. If we come together to build a product and say that product is going to go out to everybody in the world, if we only have a group of white males from Barnsley who are building it, then that's not going to serve the black males who live in, I don't know, Rotherham. It's not going to serve the white males who live in Spain, or the white males who live in South Africa, or the black women who live in South Africa, because the white male experience in Barnsley is quite a closed thing. So if I take a South African woman, a South African man, a bloke from Barnsley, a bloke from Rotherham, and somebody from London, and somebody from France, and somebody from America, then what I get is a product that's built that's got a whole set of different life experiences. So the broader my life experiences, the better able I am to reach my client set. And if you're building apps, then this is absolutely fundamental, that you are building for everyone. And the more life experience you can get into your design team, the more applicable your app is to the user who's out there. This research report that I'm showing on the screen is from the Technical University of Munich, and they showed that where companies have more diverse teams, they have more often products which have come from their innovation as opposed to products that's just, you know, also ran products. So there's a lot of research out there. It will help you to build any business cases you need for the processes that you need to build for inclusivity. Another set of 3 questions for you. Let me just do a thing here to underline it. Okay, what do you consider to be the very top technical role in your company? So if you want to type that into chat. And I've given you some suggestions there. We've got a couple of CTOs. Anyone got architects? No, they couldn't see it. Thank you, Sarah. Any senior engineers? CTO. Okay. What about this one? What's the gender mix in that top technical role? So are they male? Are they female? And if you've got more than one, i.e. architects or senior engineers, then what's the gender ratio? So if you want to type in whether they're male or female, or whether, if you've got a role where there are more than one, so 0, Jessica, so that says the CTO is a male or a female? Okay, thank you. And thank you, Joe. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jessica. Ah, Kath. Ah, interesting. Thank you. And what about this one? What's the ethnic mix there? Are they white, black, Asian? I say that hesitantly because Asian is one of those blocking terms that collects people and really perhaps shouldn't. So what's ethnicity? Okay, thank you, thank you. So there are some things that get in the way of us. So we kind of know. Thank you, Kath, Joe, Jessica. So morally, we kind of know that we need to be inclusive, but there are some things that get in the way. Afi, predominantly white, and we have one Indian female and one black female. Nice one, nice one. So let's look at the two things that seem to get in the way, apart from the processes, which I will cover in a second, and they kind of fit into those processes. So the first of those is unconscious bias, which you do hear a lot of. And we were just saying before we started, Becky and I, that there was a comment in the news today that a very senior executive had said unconscious bias was nonsense, but then he displayed absolute bias and had to step down from his role. So it was really, really interesting that he was decrying the concept of unconscious bias, but didn't get it. So you could define it as a preference for some people over others, but that preference bypasses your self-awareness. You're not always aware that it's there. And I've put up some pictures. So depending on the music that you like, then if you met somebody who said, oh, you know, I'm a complete headbanger, me, I love heavy rock, you'd kind of have a nice feeling about them because you might be a heavy rocker too. Or depending on your musical preference, if you really, really liked rap and somebody said, oh, I love rap, all of a sudden you're starting to like them just that little bit more. And that's why when we spend time socializing with new people, we say things like, oh, what kind of music do you like? And it's about establishing how like us they are. And we have a bias. It's called affinity bias, and it's a bias for folk that are like us. Thing is that it can have us hiring people who are like us, which maybe isn't ideal, especially if you're looking for a new innovation team and you've hired everybody who's just like you, then that kind of doesn't work really, does it? So we need to manage our biases, and we need to manage them around the management of people and and taking on people. So when we hire and then when we assess our staff, we need to manage our biases. And there are hundreds of them, hundreds and hundreds. And the good place to go and look to start reading is perhaps Wikipedia. And if you put cognitive bias into Wikipedia, it will throw you back the longest list. And then you can go and click through each one of those cognitive biases and see what it is. But they're all hugely pertinent to the way we manage people, the way we take them on, the way we assess them, and also hugely pertinent to our big business decisions. So a key aspect of that. And the other one is privilege. So privilege is starting to be a big thing. It's talked about all the time. And yet it's really hard concept to grasp. So one of the nice ways of thinking about privilege is if you think about a staircase. So in our lives, staircases are everywhere. Staircases are completely ubiquitous. And so for all those of us who have no problems walking up a set of stairs, we are privileged because we don't have a problem with it. In fact, we don't even have to think about how privileged we are. It never occurs to us that walking up a set of stairs is a privilege, but it is, because for a person who's living with a disability, which stops them easily walking up a set of stairs or even getting up a set of stairs at all, then we are hugely privileged, those of us who can walk upstairs. But we didn't notice it because it just never occurred to us. And privilege is not something that you can entirely be blamed for until you know about it. So you can't be blamed for being born a man or for being born a woman. But when you recognize your privilege and you understand what that gives you, then it's an issue that you need to deal with. Now, I've got something to send you, which I'm not going to play now. I just got to go find it because it's right up the top of this chat. And it is a fabulous little 1-minute video, which you can all click into and save for later. Don't all start it now or else. But this is putting on a pair of white privilege glasses and seeing the world from a Black person's perspective. And it only takes a minute, but it's incredibly powerful. And the last one here is, how much money did your parents have? And how did that affect your life chances? So again, you were born into a world where you didn't have a choice where you were born to or who your parents were. You just arrived. And so you didn't have a choice about how much money they had and therefore how much privilege they could give you. And sometimes when you're working really hard on a project, on your exams, you kind of think, oh, I'm working really hard. But just think about someone who's really working hard, who didn't have the good and supportive background that your parents could give you. So privilege comes in lots of different ways, and it really, really starts to impact at work when we're trying to be inclusive. Okay, so those are two of the key things that will get in the way of creating inclusive environments. So let's look at what you need to do to create an inclusive environment. So this is our list of things. Other people have got other lists of things, but they pretty much come down to the same things that you need to do to support diversity in the workplace. So the first thing you need is you need to establish where you are. Then you need to develop an internal capacity to value difference, and you need to tell the world about what you're doing. And then you should be working on your processes and procedures for talent management. And all along with that, you need an executive sponsor. You need somebody really, really senior who gets this and is pushing for it from the top. Because if you're an employee resource group or an employee group doing women in tech or the ethnic group for such a company, then it's hard unless you've got that executive support. And the company stands to gain. So that business case information will really help you. You need to be proactive and you need to create debate within the organization. And the only way that we've found to do that is to tell everybody about things like biases and tell everybody about things like privileges so that they can start to say to one another in the corridor, oh, you know, oh, sorry, that was me being really biased. Because at that point, you're getting debate across the business. So I thought we'd go through some of these things. So the first one, I've got a question for you. How do you establish your starting point? Well, I can tell you it's by monitoring. So can you stick into the chat one of the things that you would monitor to understand whether you've got a diversity and inclusion issue within your teams? So it can be anything. What would you monitor? It'd be great to see one from each of you. Come on, Anne-Marie, I know you can think of something. Ah, Afi, thank you. Ethnic representation, great, and neurodiverse, brilliant. Oh yeah, and reasons for leaving. And reasons for leaving after about 3 months after they've gone, because 3 months after they've gone is when they'll start to talk to you again. Individualized feedback from team members on the feeling. Yeah, absolutely. Cultural surveys. How do you feel when you work here? And that will tell you, Joe, whether the ethnicity and gender of the team is, yes, whether it's representative of society, and also whether it's representative of society in that region. So if you think about London, 40% Black, Asian, minority ethnic in London. So is it representative of that locality as well? Promotions and seniority, absolutely. Any others? Ethnicity of the company. Yeah, I think that's probably right. Thank you, Kath. Some of the other things that you might start to think about is who's getting the goodies. So we saw early on that people with disabilities and women were paid less, significantly less than the males, than the white males. And so one of the things you want to understand is who's getting all the rewards. And rewards are not just the salary, but it could be the bonuses, could be who got the special assignment, who got the brilliant project, who got to work with the top customer. Was it always the same kind of people? So it's not just the obvious things, but could be the more subtle rewards that people are getting. So yeah, climate, we looked at, somebody mentioned how people feel. So the cultural audit studies, that kind of thing. How many people you're getting in at the front? So how many women are we getting in? How many people of colour do we get in through the doors? How many do we get in as CVs, but how many do we interview? And what's the end of the interview process? At the end of the interview process, did everybody who came out the other side and started working for our company end up being a white male? In which case, if we had brilliant inputs at the start, what went wrong in the middle of it, and what are we doing with our interview processes, and how quickly do people reach seniority? And then many of you said the protected characteristics, so ethnicity and gender, and the other 9 protected characteristics. So the next part is developing the internal capacity to value difference. And this is where we get all enthusiastic. And that's why we think that it's really important that you educate. So we believe that you can't ask a company to recruit properly and recruit for inclusivity if you haven't educated the managers how to manage their bias, because what will happen is you'll get all these amazing people in the door and they'll stay 2 minutes because it didn't feel right, or you'll get all the amazing CVs in but they never get to work for the company because the managers didn't manage their own bias, didn't understand their own privilege, or they were kind of quite free with their micro inequities, those little digs at people that come from their own privilege and their own status. So there's a lot in that training, and it doesn't all have to be expensive stuff. There's lots of free training out there, but get the executives trained. If there's nothing else you do, get them trained, because they're the ones who need to buy into it. And then review your processes. So I've got 2 sets of processes for you, and then we're pretty much done. A bit on inclusive leadership. So one set of processes is about attracting people into the company, and the second set is about what you do to retain them, and that is the most difficult part. So for the inflow into your company, you can use government legislation. So in 2011, there was a piece of legislation called Positive Action, And we're hearing that still people don't understand what positive action is. So here goes. If you get 2 candidates in to interview and they're both amazing, and if you know that you have no people of colour in the business, and these 2 candidates, you can't really decide between them. They're a little bit different. One's got a bit more marketing pizzazz. The other one's a brilliant web designer. But actually, they could both do what you need them to do in terms of web design. So, which one do you take? Positive action when they're equal, when your processes are correct and you've recorded it, allows you to take the person of colour because you're redressing a balance, or to take the woman because you're redressing a balance. Positive action is really important. But in order to do that, you need to be sure that your interview structure and your how you get CVs and blind CVs and all that is tight, and that you are undertaking it correctly and that you are recording it. Because should anyone ever challenge you, then you want to be able to say, no, we are totally correct on all of this. And that means you should be doing proper interviews, should be doing fact finding, you should have panels for your interviews, because bias could be playing out there. And you should really be thinking about your supply chain as well, because in order to do positive action, you need the CVs in the door that are 1 woman and 1 man, or 1 white person and 1 person of colour. And if your recruitment agency doesn't get that, then they'll just keep sending you the same old, same old. And there's a very slim chance that you will be able to meet some kind of aspiration about getting a better balance, a better inclusivity. And then when you get them into the company, then the trouble really starts, or the hard work really starts. You need to be checking all sorts of things to make sure that you are being equal. So annual assessments can be hugely unequal. And there's quite a bit of research that shows how women or people of colour are not assessed in the same way, which means when you think about an assessment, it's the gateway to, I got a more salary, I got a better job, I got the next big project. That's what assessment will do for you. So you need to be sure that it's correct. And again, bias comes into assessment. You need to be keeping dashboards. You need to be doing the monitoring that we talked about earlier, so that you can understand where you're losing people, or whether they're making progress, and whether they're enjoying their careers with you. And you need to be communicating internally and externally what you are doing around this stuff. And the last set of those retention processes, you need to be offering them all sorts of things. So you need to make sure that they know that they're going to be equally paid, and that they've got access to flexible working, whether they're a working dad or a working mum, and they've got maternity and paternity, that, you know, you're tracking your levers, dashboards again, and you need to understand how they feel about working with you. So those cultural audits are really, really important, and they can be really expensive. So don't do it for the whole organization. Do it for 1 department and extrapolate, or do it for a department where there is a problem, and see who you're likely to lose. Finally, you need to be thinking about your managers, because they are a huge part of all of this. And so inclusive, for us anyway, inclusive leadership is key here. So we think that inclusive leadership is roughly in these 4 areas. And I think back to the best managers I ever had, and they were inspirational, and they mucked in, but they respected me, and they empowered me, and they trusted me, and they understood themselves, and they understood others through knowing that. And they were totally committed to speaking out, supporting me, challenging others on behalf of me. That made me feel wanted. It made me feel included. And if that's what you can get from your managers, then that's how you'll get to a state of inclusion for everyone. So I'm pretty much done, but we've stuffed all of this into the Women in Tech book. There's loads that we can share with you, lots of research. So I'm open for questions, and I know Becky said she was going to be here. Thank you, Becky.
Yes, I'm back. Thank you. Again, lots to think about from everything that we've gone through there. Does anyone have any questions? Obviously, as I said at the start, feel free to type them in the chat, or if you prefer, sometimes it's easier if you want to unmute yourself and kind of and ask those direct. We can give a few minutes just to see if there is anything anyone wants to discuss.
I'm really happy to have an open chat, Becky, if you want to do that.
Yeah,
we kind of teach like that all the time, so I'm really used to having discussion groups and what have you.
Yeah, if there's anything at all, and just I know a few people were late joining, so just reiterate, Gillian has very kindly given us a free place on her unconscious bias training that's happening on Tuesday the 16th, 10 till 2 p.m, and that's going to be held on Zoom. So we have one free place. If you want to apply for that free place, you obviously just need to be free on 16th, 10 till 2. If you can send me an email, which is becky@manchesterdigital.com. I've put it in the chat, but I'll put it in again in a moment. You can send me an email before Monday, and then on Monday morning, I will select at random one winner and let you get in touch and organise the details for you. So it'd be an amazing session to go on, and amazing that it's completely free. So if you do want to do that, make sure you drop me an email before Monday. So do we have anyone wanting to discuss anything? Any comments? Any questions?
I think I've silenced everybody, Becky.
You've covered everything. Who we've got? Nicola.
I want to ask about tokenism. What I found with the Black people that I know are very often the only person of colour in the room, and I think that in regards to tokenism, it should be seen as more being at the table rather than tokenism, because when employees talk about, oh, people should be employed on merit, well, that can't be right. If everyone is employing white males, they can't be all the best of the bunch. So people aren't getting employed on merit.
No.
Getting employed on the fact that we live in a patriarchal society that is set up to serve the white male.
Yeah, so there's, oh God, Nicola, there's so much there. I mean, so when you start to talk about privilege and the platform that you've launched your life on, you know, the white male could feel really, really like got at. And I don't want that to happen, but I get that tokenism happens. And yet, if you are a woman, you do have to work harder. And so you could be the token, but stuff it. We have to prove that we can do this stuff. And you know, if you are the Black person in the room, you will succeed. You will. And then there are all sorts of other layers, Nicola, like if you're the Black person in the room, you're living with stereotype threat. And if you're the woman in the room, you're living with stereotype threats. So that can be impacting not only your self-esteem and your belief in yourself, but also your ability to achieve, because, you know, if somebody tells you you can't throw balls often enough, you'll believe them. So there's so much you've said there. Oh, and the last thing I was going to say to that one was, you know, if you are the token in the room, if you are the trans woman in the room, then at that point, don't ask, everybody else shouldn't be asking you how it feels to be a trans person. It's not your job to teach them. You know, it's, so there's so much you said. Yeah, absolutely.
I think we've got a question there from Afi. Do you want to
Yeah, no, it was just just following on from what Nicola says, because I agree with what Nicola said, but I think as well, from my perspective, when I'm looking at organisations and from talking to other people and friends, I think that optical diversity, even though it can be seen outwardly as a bit of a tick box exercise, I think it's still quite important. I think it's a part of the process which a lot of companies are probably going to be going through right now. And there is this debate about whether somebody that's from an ethnic minority group or from, somebody that has a disability or some other, doesn't have some other privilege, whether they've been hired for their capability to do the role, or whether it's because of the fact that they have a protected characteristic. But I think for me, people are going to probably more so now than ever before, because we've got this huge global debate about diversity, are going to be attracted to companies that are actually up in their game. They've got, like aspirational diversity targets in place, and they're actually doing something about it. So yeah, I just think it's so important, and I think there's always going to be that question where people ask, oh, did you only get the job because you're Asian and you're female, or because you've got a disability? I think that's going to be asked, inevitably by some people. However, unless you get that optical representation, we're never going to move forward. We'll still have senior leadership teams that are predominantly white male. So I think it's a way I don't think it's the full solution, but I think it's a good way forward.
Yeah, and we've always said that those role models are key, and Nicola's agreeing back with you, Afi. There's so much here. There's so much to pull apart, and we are, for many companies, at the very start of something, and that's why, to me, if you can get at the middle managers and get them trained, and this is my passion. Equality is absolutely my passion, but I also recognize from all my years in industry that if you don't sort the middle management out and their understanding of the world around them, how to manage people, things like emotional intelligence and being inclusive as a leader, if you don't sort them lot out, then they're the ones who are pointing you out as the token. So it's really, really important that they are there supporting you and challenging others on your behalf. And so I think they're key. I think they're enormously important.
I think HR managers could do a lot better as well. There seems to be a lot of females in HR.
Yeah, Nicola, I agree with you. I've got a bee in my bonnet about HR as well. And sorry, go on.
Well, from my experience, I was discriminated against when I went back to work after having a child, and this happens to 54% of women, according to the website Pregnant Then Screwed. And there's such, especially in digital, they talk about skills shortage, and there's a massive talent of skills out there, and they're called women with children. I think it's disgraceful how you just sidelined once you've had, once you've, as I say, once you've produced the future workers, you put on the scrap heap.
So the reason I've got a bee in my bonnet about HR is when you think about chief execs, they're the chief executive officer, and then you've got the chief technical officer, and you've got the chief information officer, if that's what you call it, and the chief financial officer, and they're mostly male. And then you get the director of marketing. And CMO is a really new term. And what that means is that for decades, the role of looking after people has been denigrated, has been put down, and it's been given to a bunch of women who had no power and were not seen as valuable as the CFO or the CMO, as the marketing, or the CIO. And so almost, you could get angry with HR, but you can't, because they've been pushed into a corner almost, and it's a predominantly female workforce. So I, I recognise that we need to support HR as well, but that needs to come from executives. So, this all fits together. The executives need to get it, the middle management need to get it, and then we can all feel that somebody's working on our behalf, whoever we are, from whatever background.